Hey guys, this is Barking Madly again, and this is my promised part 2 of concerns about Ron Paul. I promise I'll try not to sit here and sway around as much as I was on the other video. Sorry about that. This next one's going to be directed mainly at Ron Paul's plans or ideas on trying to reduce the size of the federal government. One of the biggest things he had mentioned was getting rid of several of the departments. The Department of Energy, Commerce, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, FEMA, Interstate Commerce, and the IRS. Some of them I don't know a whole heck of a lot about, like Department of Commerce or Interstate Commerce. Other ones I know a bit more about, and actually his thoughts about getting rid of them kind of concerns me. We'll start with the Department of Energy. On a top line level, it's not that big a deal, but there's a couple of things that I find troubling about getting rid of the DOE. Lambdog, at one point you mentioned that part of the government's job, just in broad strokes, whether it's local, federal, or whatnot, is to do things for which there is no profit available, like doing roads and whatnot. The DOE has a bunch of different things. Among them, they do the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they also do a lot of energy-related R&D. Los Alamos and a whole slew of other, Lawrence Livermore, and a bunch of other national laboratories are funded directly out of the Department of Energy. These generally do not produce any immediate profit. Oftentimes the work that comes out of there has a great deal to do with how things will be profitable in the future, but a lot of it is 10, 15, 20 years in the future. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I believe, is also regulated by them. This represents a function that I think has to be handled at a federal level, or at least at a nationwide level. There are some things that are just too dangerous that you don't want Nevada, for example, to have to pay for its own Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Or there's 150 nuclear reactors in the United States, and I don't know where they all are. I think almost every state has one. And having every state have to fund its own Nuclear Regulatory Commission or have a nuclear policy becomes overburdensome, and quite frankly, I don't know about you, but there's some states that aren't funded well enough or are too heavily corrupt in their politics, and I use Nevada because I have a lot of dealings with there. I don't want them to, we have a hard time funding things properly at a national level in some areas. I really sure as shit don't want something dangerous like nuclear power being regulated by the states. It's not prudent. For example, it's fine having National Guard that has some significant level of weaponry, but you don't want them to each have their own nukes. There's some level of finesse and savvy that you just don't want to have at the state level. Also, given global climate change and all that be damned, and the concerns about peak oil be damned, one of the few things that is going to be very, very problematic from a national policy level is energy usage, consumption, and obtaining of as energy. I don't think you want to leave that relegated to second-rate state-level bureaucrats. They're not going to be smart enough, they're not going to have the clout to deal internationally. So I think getting rid of the Department of Energy is a bad idea. Maybe some of the sections within it could get rid of. I don't know. I don't dig that deeply into it. Department of Commerce, I don't know. It seems to me it might not be the best thing, because one of the things that the federal government is tasked with is managing trade between the states. Anything that affects more than one state. Maybe that could be done at a much smaller level. I don't know. But I don't have a whole lot of opinion either way about the Department of Commerce. Health and Human Services. I have big issues here as well. Amongst the things handled by the Health and Human Services is the FDA. I am a chemist by trade and by learning and by function for the last 18 years. I've been working in a federally regulated company and marketplace for the last 10 of those, and then for a few years before that as well. As much as I hate dealing with the FDA on a yearly basis, dealing with their audits and paper chasing and all this other crap, and even though I do it, acknowledge that a lot of people there are lifers within the government. They perform a vitally crucial function within the United States. That is making sure that all of the products that go into your body, food, medication, are safe. Do they screw it up at times? Oh yeah. I mean, look at all the drugs that have been pulled off the market 6, 8, 10 years after they were introduced to the market, because it turns out that the corporation decided to go for profit and not necessarily be fully upfront about what their concerns were. Seems to me that's a corporate issue, a lack of morality and ethics and responsibility on the part of the corporation, and not lacking necessarily by the folks at the FDA, or at least the bare function of the FDA. Also, you've got the CDC, Center for Disease Control. That's also managed by Health and Human Services. Doing all the research into how do you control these, doing the monitoring, the databases and all that stuff that keep track of all that stuff, that needs to be done at a national level. You can't do all that stuff. You don't want to have the states just trying to have some kind of harmonized agreement that we're going to keep track of that, because it's not going to happen. And the research into it, none of the states are going to fund it because, quite frankly, like I said, in Nevada and some other poorer states, they can't afford it. And as you mentioned earlier, that functions that are not profitable need to be handled by government, and I think the federal government is a perfect place to put that. Homeland Security, not a fan of that agency at all. For me, it strikes too much of the Vaterland, or the Rodina, the motherland of Russia. I'm not a fan, just in concept, that whole agency. So, in general, I'm pretty much in favor of getting rid of it, although there are some functions that they do a pretty good job in, and that's integrating FBI, CIA, and all the other alphabet soup folks. The BATF can go far, go piss in the wind as far as I'm concerned. FEMA. I am not a fan of getting rid of it. Ignore the administration that was under control of it. When large regional disasters like Katrina happen, that will absolutely, completely, and thoroughly overwhelm any local, state, or county-wide agency to be able to handle it. You need to have some kind of agency that's able and willing and set up to take care of these emergencies on a national level. I know the whole prepper attitude about it. I mean, I would not consider myself a prepper in this type of community's aspect of it, but I'm an earthquake prepper. I have a lot of water set aside, months worth of food, that kind of thing set aside. But you can only do so much. If my house gets washed away or demolished in a hurricane, or an earthquake, I live in Southern California, I can only prep so much, and at some point, I don't care how much you try not to deal with getting federal or government handouts. There's only so much the individual can do, and you need government to be able to step in and do that. And quite frankly, if things get bad enough that I can't handle myself for a week or 2 or 4 weeks, the local governments and the state governments are not going to be handling it either. So I think having FEMA around is a necessity. The Interstate Commerce and the Department of Commerce, like I said, I don't know enough about them to say yay or nay. The IRS. I'm fine with the federal government having a significant and sustainable revenue source. Whether it's the IRS or excise tax or something like that, it needs to be something I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I know a lot of folks are trying to push the 16th Amendment and the 17th Amendment because they feel that a federal tax is illegal. I'm fine with them, like I said, collecting money. However, I want to make sure that whatever is being done is not regressive. tax on food, for example. I've lived nap of the earth, as it were, low amounts of money and low income, to know that when you're barely making it, that the fact that in most states food is not taxed, that's one of the few things that keeps them afloat. And regressive taxes, the ones that, yeah, it's 4% of your food for everybody. However, for someone that's making 20 grand a year, a significant portion of their income is going towards that food, and so that 8% of what they're paying becomes a larger dollar amount overall. So I don't know, the IRS, nobody likes the IRS, and I think there's some fundamental flaws with the way that it works in terms of prove you're innocent instead of prove your guilt. But that we have to prove we're innocent, whereas the IRS, most other places, they have to prove our guilt. So I don't know, there needs to be something in its place to help maintain all these neat toys like the military and all that. Not sure how that one's handled. There's something needs to be there as that fulfills that function, whether it's the IRS or some other large federal agency, or smaller ideally. But if you're going to be if you're going to be collecting revenue from 350 million people, it's not going to be 10 people that are running it. So anyway, I'll probably deal with the international aspect last. But anyways, this is my my concerns in terms of his shrinking the federal government and trying to put a lot of it on the states. In principle, a lot of it's good, but it just in broad strokes, a lot of the stuff can't be afforded, and you don't want to deal with a bunch of different states each having their own agency covering it. You'll either have states that can't afford it or states that don't give a shit. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. That one almost could do its own thing. He wants to get rid of it and says that property law should be able to deal with it. My problem is, if you're having to file a lawsuit as a property owner, the damage has already been done. At a fundamental level, the EPA's design is to prevent that damage from happening in the first place. In simple strokes, or simple answer, that's why I think getting rid of it is a very, very, very bad idea. Then again, I know a lot of people don't like it, but I'm sorry, I like having reasonably breathable air, reasonably drinkable water, and I like having some accountability for it. Ron Paul's aspect of it seems to be reactive. I do like the proactive aspect of the FDA, or pardon me, the EPA, and also of the FDA as well. Anyway, trying to keep this a little bit shorter, barely managed. This is 13 minutes, so talk to you guys later.